I always tell people to stop splitting off from churches when they go too liberal. It never works. And people will tell me, well, it's not like your Reconquista plan has ever worked either. Well, actually, it has. Hey guys, welcome back to KingdomCraft, where we build churches in Minecraft while talking about Christianity. Today, I'll be working once again on building Duns Scotus Presbyterian Church, while I talk about why we shouldn't build new church denominations, or rather, we shouldn't have to build new denominations because we should keep our old denominations faithful. A lot of times in the past 100 years, historic Christian denominations have gone liberal, so the conservatives in those denominations have split off and formed new ones. But those new ones were never nearly as historically rooted, never nearly had as many connections or seminaries or people, honestly. Whenever people tried to start a new parallel institution, it was always very underdeveloped compared to the old one. And a good analogy for this is when Twitter was run by a lot of very woke people, a lot of conservatives formed conservative offshoot social media platforms like Parler and Truth Social that went absolutely nowhere. But then when Twitter was liberated by Elon Musk, it actually became a very, very strong breeding ground for conservative ideas. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you're conservative or not, you have to admit that whoever controls the mainstream thing has a lot more power than the person who splits off from the mainstream thing. So I think we can apply that to churches. I think that is a good argument that the churches that have the mainstream institutions will always have more power in the culture than the churches that split off from the mainstream institutions. Now, I understand that the mainline churches don't have influence on the culture anymore, but that's not because they lack the ability. It's because they lack the willingness. The mainline churches are able, but not willing, to influence the culture because they've been hijacked by liberalism. They don't believe the gospel anymore. That's a generalization because, my whole Reconquista movement is about reminding people that there are still a lot of mainline churches that are in the minority that are faithful, but I'm making a generalization here. Generally speaking, the mainline churches are able but not willing to influence the culture, and the conservative offshoots, like, PCA, ACNA, Global Methodist, the conservative offshoots are willing but not able to influence the culture. So the only way to have, Protestant churches that are both able and willing to influence the culture is to retake the mainline churches, as I've always been saying. Now, how is this possible? A lot of people say, it sounds great in theory. I'd love for these old historic church denominations like the Episcopal Church or the United Methodist Church or the Presbyterian Church USA, I'd love for them to be retaken, but I just don't see how this is possible. Well, it actually is. And there are several examples of it working. I'm going to give 3 main examples plus an example from the early church. So there are 3 modern examples of Reconquista actually working. Now, I'm not taking credit for these. All these things happened way before I came along. They weren't associated with our Reconquista movement. But what they did is what our Reconquista movement strives to do. So the first one is actually the most obvious, even if you're not a Christian at all. If you're in America, you've probably heard of the Southern Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist Convention. It is a bastion of conservatism. Recently, they kicked out a pastor, Rick Warren, for having women pastors. They kicked out a church. They kicked out Rick Warren's church. So they are still solidly conservative. Yes, I know the Southern Baptist Church has a lot of problems, and I have criticism of Baptist theology overall. I'm not a Baptist, I'm a Presbyterian, and I'm very critical of Baptist theology. But I have to respect how they legitimately did retake their denomination from liberalism. The Southern Baptist Church is not considered mainline by the media because it's conservative, but structurally it basically is a mainline church. It is just as historic as most mainline churches. You could say they split from the Northerners, but it's not really clear who split from who. Yes, Northern Baptists do exist. They're called the American Baptists, which makes sense because the Civil War was not the North versus the South. It was the South versus America. Never ask a woman her age, never ask a man his salary, never ask a Southern Baptist how they got the Southern in their name. But seriously, because the Southern Baptist Church is a mainline church, they were experiencing the same shift towards liberalism that all the mainlines were experiencing in the 20th century. This is hard to believe now, but the Southern Baptist Church helped Roe v. Wade get passed. The Southern Baptist Church used to be pretty liberal, and obviously not quite as liberal as a lot of the mainline denominations are today, but they were heading down the same path. And there was a conservative resurgence in the 1990s. The Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist Church, was legitimately retaken from the liberals, and the way this worked is the seminary, one of the mainstream Baptist seminaries, was retaken. And the way to take over a church is take over the seminaries. When the seminaries went liberal, the church went liberal. When the seminaries were retaken by Orthodox Christians, lowercase o Orthodox, which just means right belief, when the seminaries became conservative and Orthodox, the churches became conservative and Orthodox. You want to take over a denomination, take over the seminaries. That's where the action happens. And that's what the Baptists did. The Baptists did take it over, and it was easy to implement change because of Congregationalist church government in the Baptist Church. Congregationalism is where each church is sort of independent and autonomous. So the opposite of Congregationalism is an Episcopal structure where there's a hierarchy of bishops that govern the church. And the Episcopal structure is really bad if you have a progressive bishop, because no matter how much positive change you make in your own church, the bishop could literally just fire you and get rid of you, and that's it, basically. So, yeah, there's a lot of problems with that, obviously. But there's another case of Reconquista working with an Episcopal structure. So, my view of church government is a Presbyterian church government, which is sort of in between Congregationalist and Episcopal. Why isn't this working? I thought the stone cutter works on deep slate. Do I have to, put this in the furnace? I don't know how this works. Anyway, my view of church government is between Congregationalist and Episcopal. It's Presbyterian, which is hierarchical, but more of a bottom-up hierarchy than top-down hierarchy. The analogy is like Episcopal church government is like a monarchy, Presbyterian church government is like a republic, and Congregationalist church government is like more of a pure democracy. But either way, regardless, there is an example of Reconquista sort of working in an Episcopal-style church. And when I say Episcopal, I don't mean the Episcopal Church. I'm still waiting on a Reconquista of that one. And I am helping people who are actively working to retake the Episcopal Church. Follow the Episcopal Fellowship for Renewal. They formed out of my Reconquista Discord server, even though they're autonomous from me. They sometimes get frustrated with me, so yes, they are independent of everything, all the work that I'm doing, but they do great work of their own. But yeah, the denomination I'm referring to here is the Latvian State Lutheran Church. The Church of Latvia is a Lutheran church that used to ordain women as ministers, but stopped doing that. How did that happen? They just got a based archbishop. They got an archbishop who was theologically conservative, and that was it. It was game over for the liberals. So it's sort of like a trade-off. That's why I don't think any form of church government is necessarily better or worse for Reconquista. I think it just depends. It's like, if there's this guy spying on me. It's like if you have a conservative bishop, then obviously the Episcopal church government structure is a lot better, because then they can just enforce a biblical teaching on all the lower down churches. But if you have a liberal bishop, then a Congregationalist church government structure is better, because then the churches are not obliged to listen to the bishop if the bishop is liberal. So it's a trade-off, and there's examples of Episcopal government being good, like the Latvian Lutheran Church. There's examples of Episcopal church government being very bad, like the United Methodist Church, which has like a quasi-Episcopal church government where the bishops are so overpowered. The joke is that the Pope wishes he had as much ecclesial power as the United Methodist bishops, and they sort of scared a bunch of conservative pastors out of their wits, and that's why they all left to form the Global Methodist Church. So yeah, Episcopal church government really did not work out in the United Methodist Church, at least not as far as I'm concerned, as someone who holds to, biblical teaching. If you're a progressive, I guess it was good news for you. It wasn't good news for me and it wasn't good news for me and my gang, basically. Wasn't good news for my crowd. So yeah, that's an example of it not working, and there's also examples of Congregationalism not working well, because of course the most liberal mainline church is the United Church of Christ. But it worked in the Southern Baptist Church by a seminary getting retaken, and therefore a lot of other pastors just gradually shifting to be more conservative. And it worked in a church with an Episcopal type government in the Church of Latvia, where there was just one conservative archbishop who ended the practice of women's ordination. The third example is another example of a seminary being retaken. It's the LCMS. The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is a very conservative Lutheran denomination, and they're also not really classified as a mainline church, but the reason they're not classified as a mainline church is because they are conservative. It's not because of anything structural in them. They technically never split off from anyone. So technically you could say LCMS is kind of a mainline denomination. That's why, of all the mainstream Protestant traditions, Lutherans need Reconquista the least, because while the ELCA is very liberal, you could make the argument that the LCMS is genetically just as mainline as the ELCA is. So if the ELCA falls, Lutherans will still have a strong, historically rooted Lutheran institution. Whereas for us Presbyterians, if the PCUSA falls, we don't have any historic Presbyterian denomination to fall back onto. Yes, there's the PCA. Yes, there's the OPC. Yes, there's EPC and ECO, but those aren't historic. Those are recent offshoots that don't have, the historic seminaries and connections and endowments and all that. If the PCUSA does fall, we have to make do with what we have, but I'm still going to try to prevent that. More Nestorius consecrate. There's a Nestorian around here. We have a Nestorian. It's probably someone from John MacArthur's church. But anyway, so yeah, the third example is the LCMS. There was a big controversy known as Seminex, and I think this is the most inspiring thing. So I said before, a lot of the seminaries have gone liberal, and that's where most of the problems are. The reason you see churches that have liberal pastors is because there's liberal seminaries, because the seminaries went liberal. The seminaries go liberal, the pastors go liberal, the churches go liberal. That's how it works. And there was a seminary called Concordia Lutheran Seminary that was going liberal. It was teaching the historical critical method. That's where they analyze the Bible and try to pick it apart and try to debunk all the supernatural elements of it. But there was a group of conservatives who just took over, and they literally fired all the liberal professors. Stone cold. Just like that. No mercy. And it worked. Now, of course, what happened is the liberal students threw a huge, massive temper tantrum. They literally, rioted the school and, looted the library and stole a bunch of, ancient theological texts. People were rioting and looting back in the 1950s, by the way, guys. It's not a modern thing. These were a bunch of German kids, a bunch of liberal German Lutheran kids rioting and looting in a seminary. Yes, this actually happened. You can look up the Seminex controversy. It's kind of crazy the things that happen in church history. God is a funny author of the story. That is our universe, because God does control everything. But yeah, that is what happened with the whole Seminex controversy. It was a mess, but it worked in our favor, because thanks to that, there was a strongly Orthodox conservative Lutheran seminary, and because of that, the LCMS to this very day is a strongly Orthodox Lutheran denomination. I'm sure it has problems. I've heard some people saying it has problems. Every denomination has problems, okay? Until Jesus comes back, the church is always going to have problems. So anyone who says that there can be a church that does not have problems does not know what they're talking about. They're being kind of dumb and goofy, right? Okay, wait, I have to put this in my inventory somehow. Yeah, I have to get this cobbled deep slate. I have to just mine this so I can turn it into stairs. But yeah, okay, everyone decided to congregate in my church for some reason. So yeah, the third example of a denomination sort of being reconquisted is LCMS, because all that was necessary to do was just for one seminary to get conservative Orthodox leadership and fire all the liberal professors, and the students just walked out. That's the one example of liberals leaving the conservative thing rather than conservatives leaving the liberal thing, and it worked massively in our favor. So what Reconquista needs to do is somehow we need to get, wealthy, influential people to take over the mainstream seminaries and fire all the liberal professors. That's what we have to do. It's not going to be pretty, but we have to do it, and the rewards for doing so will be massive. And finally, the most obvious early church example of Reconquista is with the greatest theologian and saint outside the Bible, Saint Athanasius. There was a time in the early church when the entire church basically fell to Arianism, fell to the Arian heresy of, Arius. There was a time when that happened, and it seemed like the church was about to fully become Arian. Athanasius got exiled 5 times for supporting the truth, but he didn't give up, and he eventually retook the entire church. That's the last example of a Reconquista being successful. So guys, thank you for watching this video. I was just giving 3 examples of how Reconquista can be successful. We need to actually implement it. We need to get involved in the seminaries. We need to get involved in the institutions. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all later. Now I'm going to speed this up while I keep working on my roof over here.